I'm the last. I am the last rampart between you and some drinks, which is not a coincidence because here is our story of our hangover with Reactor. Basically, so I have already brilliantly presented, so maybe it's the time to thank all the organizers for their great job along this 3 days. Basically, I work for Clean Agora. We are mainly a free and open source software company. We offer a large range of services from assistance on open source software to specific development, including an R&D department, which is mainly focused on our big project, which is OpenPass, which aims to be a credible alternative to more well-known enterprise solutions. And we have created a lot of open source components for that, but we were forced to use some already existing, like Apache Gems, as Pavel introduced it, is mostly a framework used to build very extensive mail servers, and it's treated in the following architecture and the bird view. Globally, you have a core which is responsible to hold all the information about mail queues and how our products are configured. And mail queue is a really important subject in Gems because it's basically a work queue which will be processed by a set of mailets, which are a declarative way of expressing a set of behaviors. This mail queue is provisioned by a set of protocols, so IMAP, JMAP, and SMTP. We also have really tiny administration interface and something important we call the storage API, which provides a wide range of implementation, from memory implementation to GPA to eventually Cassandra and Elasticsearch. When we took over the project like 5 or 6 years ago, it was mostly single node targeted, meaning that we were using Apache ITMQ, GPA, and Apache Lucene, which was a really big concern because OpenPass is supposed to be very scalable. So we had to create a new set of products and replacing most of the components. So we now are using RabbitMQ, OpenStack Swift, and Apache Cassandra, and finally Elasticsearch. Doing that was not an easy business because it changed most of the paradigm in Gems. So now we are mostly IO-bound, meaning that most of our time is spent in IOs, waiting for them to complete. We had multiple leaks, including memory leaks, but also thread leaks. From time to time, every 1 or 2 months, we were getting like dozens of thousands of threads, which at this level is a real problem because 50% of your time is spent in thread switching and the other 15 in garbage collecting, which means that except of heating the oceans, your software does nothing. And finally, we had a thread management issue. We have developed a large set of concurrency libraries on Crafted One, which was a painful experience to do, to write, to test, to read. And at some point, one of our the freelance developer working with us show up at the daily. We are organized in a Scrum team, and say, okay, I spent my day yesterday just trying to figure out why some Cassandra queries were where timeouts, even if they are supposed to be fast. And in fact, he dig into he dig into that just to see that the Cassandra record timeout on the time where the query entered in the Cassandra thread pool, which is an issue because from time to time this thread pool is overused, and so we looked for it, and in fact most of our business code were running in the Cassandra thread pool, breaking completely the driver. So just say, okay, let's just move to Reactor. The day later, he introduced it in maybe 15 minutes, and maybe 2 or 3 days later, he went for a 3-week vacation. So I was not really confident about that. Despite of that, we had a really simplistic strategy. Most of our completable features were created in our Cassandra entry point. So we said, okay, just convert all the method types to Reactor 1 and propagate the chain from here. We also have seen that Reactor has a small but growing set of projects associated, and since we were using RabbitMQ, we thought it was a good idea to use it. Let's introduce some concepts before. Reactive programming is a paradigm which has emerged in the mid of 90s, and it focus on splitting on one part all the relationship between a set of behaviors, and on the other side a signal or event-driven evaluation. It was introduced in Java with the TCK, which is a technology compatibility kit. It's a set of tests with 4 main types: the publisher, which publishes some data; the subscriber, which waits on data; a processor, which is a subscriber and a publisher; and finally a subscription, which is a way to bound a publisher and a subscriber. It happens in 2 steps. In fact, you have the subscriber which asks to subscribe to the publisher, which will then create a subscription. The subscription will then handle what we call back pressure, meaning that the subscriber will ask for an element. He will locally check if it has already this element or not. If it has them, he will push them to the subscriber or eventually request it to the publisher. Reactor, Project Reactor, is an implementation of that TCK. It comes basically with 2 types, mono and flux. Mono, which represents 0 or 1 element and eventually an error, and flux represents 0 or an unbounded number of elements. It comes with what we can expect from a functional programming-ish style in mainstream languages. For example, you simply create a 39 element round from 1970, create a new person, keep only the adult one, do something, and subscribe to trigger the evaluation of the pipeline. First, let's begin by the good part. All your basic needs are fulfilled really easily. They come with a large round of what they call operators. The only big issue you have is to select the right one, but we'll see how we can handle it. You have something we have really underestimated at first, which are the processors. In fact, they represent set of common behavior. For example, you have the direct processor and the unicast processor, which represent either one producer and multiple consumer, or one consumer and multiple producer. You have a very large and extensive documentation coming with what they call marble diagram, which are graphical representation of the common behavior of an operator. And it's really worth the time investing in trying to understand it, because after a while you will really save some time just trying to just avoiding to read the plain English. And they also come with a complete guide on how to choose the right operator, which is a pretty good start. We had a huge gains in terms of readability. Before, with our uncrafted libraries, we were stuck. We were forced to express in a non-linear way something coming from a very linear business logic. While with Reactor, we can get back to better congruency level, meaning that we are now able to express linear business logic in a linear technical way. Schedulers are maybe the thing which have motivated our choice to move to Reactor. It's more or less an abstraction for an executor service, and there are basically two schedulers: the parallel one, which is CPU bound and doesn't allow blocking calls, and the bounded elastic for what they call the legacy code, which is more or less which allow you the blocking calls and so. They are ready to use. You have two main operators for that: the publication, which will impact the next element of the pipeline, and the subscription, which will act on the subscription. For example, the publication will act on the step 2 and 3, while the subscription will more or less look out all the unassigned scheduler. So for step 1, giving you this result. There is a really great emphasis on retry mechanisms. You can really tailor it. You can say, especially on which type of exception you want to retry, how many times you want to retry, and eventually if you want to insert what they call a backup, meaning some delays between the retry, just to avoid to put too much pressure on your backend. You can also easily move between mono and flux. For example, you have a flux, you do a next and you get back a mono, while if you have a mono, you can just do a repeat and you will get back a flux. The limit rate, as I explained in the React Stream specification, you can ask for multiple elements at a time. For example, if you have a very high cost per request but a very low cost per element per request, it's a good idea to just group all your requests, and that is possible with limit rate. You can also recover an error. For example, you can say, okay, either I just quit an error or I provide an alternative publisher just to either fix the current problem or provide an alternative value to that. You can also create error, which might be silly, but when in a very highly concurrent environment, sometimes you don't know whether you have been able to perform an operation. For example, here we are trying to either insert a row or update one. And our strategy was, okay, if you have done something, you just have to return a mono.just instead of a mono.empty, And to be sure that something has been done in this pipeline, you just call a signal which will check that at least one value is that only one value is present in the pipeline, and if not, trigger an error which will allow you to retry and use the other mechanism around it. One of the really other useful project coming with the writer is the writer test, which really speed up your test, because for example you have a flux which emits a value every 10 seconds. If you want to fetch 3 elements, you don't want your test to run for 30 seconds, and with the step verifier provided in this other project, you can just declaratively specify your expectation. On debugging, first, I'd like to say that debugging in a concurrent environment is painful, but debugging in a concurrent and lazy environment is worse. And I think that's why there is a very good emphasis on the debugging part in writer. For example, here you have the log operator, which allow you to see exactly what's going on under the hood and what are the reactive stream operation going on, which help you to understand how it works when you begin with that. You have also a way to give more sense to your stack trace, because when you will have your first writer stack trace, you will struggle because it has maybe 20 or 30 more stack elements in your usual stack trace, which is not really easy to debug. So the checkpoint allow you to at least give some clue on what we were trying to do. And when all ops are lost, and it was the case when we were using reactor of BitMQ at first, you have the hooks on operator debug, which will allow you to locate precisely where some pipeline were defined. Talking about the writer of BitMQ, the good part is that it's very much writer oriented, and it gives you a very neat and fluent way to deal with things like creating an exchange or a queue or doing a binding. The counterpart is a receiver, which is simpler again. Because it just gives you a plain flux that you may or may not want to acknowledge, and playing nicely with the rest of the reactor API, and you don't have to struggle to really understand how to make it work and to do the painful blocking code. The bad part now. First, there is two things about our migration from completable future. The first one is about the naming part, which in my opinion is better because completable future doesn't have a very functional programming naming style, while Reactor does. But there is a slight difference. While you were able to declare a completable future void and do then apply or then compose, and everything was triggered in reactor. Since you can't have a null in your pipeline, your map and flat map will not run the given code, which is a really big issue for the simple reason that finding a code which is running and should not is really easy. Finding a code which is not running and should run is very, very difficult. You have something which is a mistake from our side. We have tried to leverage the fact that mono can be empty, and so if the declaration of your mono is far from the moment where you do a block, even if you shouldn't, you don't know whether or not you will have a value, and whether or not you will have to call block or block optional. This point was very complicated for us because in fact, you have two types of publisher. The old publisher, which doesn't wait a subscription to emit data, and plus are not repeatable, meaning that here, for example, you expect that the publisher you give in a switch if empty doesn't run. And if you have a hot publisher, it's already running, so basically your code is screwed. So we have taken the decision to switch all our publisher to be a cold publisher, which creates a problem we have just described earlier, meaning that some of our code were not using blocks in a way or another, and again, some code were not running anymore, and so we had to fix a large set of our code regarding that. Regarding scheduler, when I first began to write this talk, the last part of the sentence was not in the documentation, and I'm a bit paranoid, so I'm aware of that, but in fact, many operators are overloaded, meaning that they provide alternative way to call them with additional parameters, and when you choose to not call and to specify given schedulers, for example, you will have by default something which doesn't play nice with your legacy application. For example, about all your code is running on bounded elastic because we have a large set of blocking calls, and if you test your code only for the normal case, everything will work fine because you say, okay, I tell the pipeline to run on the bounded elastic. So the code the looking code will run on it, and the retry won't be triggered because you are in your test in the safe place, and so you say, okay, it's good to ship. You put it in production, a retry happen, and you're screwed because you're not allowed anymore to do a blocking call because you have switched to the parallel schedulers. Regarding the request side, if you have noticed in the previous example, the first call was the right amount of element I have specified in the operator, while the second one was only 75%, which was a bit surprising at first, but reading the documentation, it was clear that there is a common strategy. But there is also some operators which are overridden with integers, and change this prefetch at least for this operator. And for example, again, the defaults are varying, either from 32 or 255, and eventually can be set via a system of property, which is a bit surprising, but can be handy when you just want to test the limit of your system without having to recompile all your application. Then, regarding flat maps, it's mainly my fault because I'm used to Haskell, and when I come to mainstream programming languages, in my mind I have a very strict translation from bind to flat map, and it works really well with Mono, but it doesn't work at all with Flux, because there are three ways basically to do flat map with different properties. The first one is about the value order, meaning that if you have a flux with element 1, 2, and 3, and an operation plus 1, if you keep the value order, you will have 2, 3, and 4. It's easily catchable with some tests. While the other issue is regarding the subtraction, meaning that even if your flux is sequential, you can have parallel operation in it. And for example, concat_map is the only one which waits for the first subscriber to complete to trigger the second one. And it creates major regression in our performances, because most of our code is expected to run in a concurrent environment. And for example, you have a very simple use case, which is I expect that for a given operation, a counter is only incremented by 1, and if not, I retry it as long as I have as long as I don't get this property. And when you have flux of operation, you want them to run sequentially to avoid to trigger the retry mechanisms, while just using flat map sequential just ruin no performance, giving us to go into the retry mechanisms by default. And I think it's here that you see the limit of the marble diagram, and there is few operators like that, but it is exactly here that you just prefer to read the plain English. Regarding the writer RabbitMQ, it was the first stripe. As I said, writer RabbitMQ is really focused on being compliant with writer, and which means that the sender.send wait for a flux which is supposed to be infinite, while we have sometimes the need to just check that a finite set of elements are sent before continuing. So it just ruins the connection, because after a while the connection isn't able to provide well-formed channels. But it's here that we have understood the power of Unicast processor. There is also other issues with that library. For example, in order to counteract the fact that sender don't ask for a new channel, you have a channel pool, but it's not a real channel pool, because it doesn't limit the number of channels it creates. So we ended up in the same issue as before. You have also an extra layer of option, which is not sufficient to be very precise with how we want to request to RabbitMQ, and we are nearly forced from time to time to copy and paste some reactor RabbitMQ code in our code base just to change one parameter. Finally, what are the results? we are using Gatling test, which is a Scala tool allowing you to specify in a DSL a set of scenario which will be run in a highly concurrent fashion, giving you some results, and it was where I was completely disappointed because our performances haven't changed at all. After 3 months of work, it's a very big deception. The good part of that is regarding the efficiency. While we were an IO-bound program, we were using 90% of our CPU, which was a shame. And basically, thanks to Writer, we dropped down to 20 to 30%, which is a bit more acceptable. Since our code is running faster, at least in a more efficient way, we had more probabilistic error, which was a good thing in a part because it allowed us to fix many design issues we had and we were not able to reproduce before. But from time to time, we are stuck with Cassandra and with the lack of strong transaction. In terms of design impact, all our handcrafted concurrency library have been deleted, which is a very good thing. Less code, less bug. We have, even if we are not fully reactive yet, we have already propagated a lot of technical terms a bit everywhere in our code base, which is never a good sign. Finally, if I have 3 advice to give you, read the doc first, because we have stubbornly not read the doc for 2 months before realizing that even if we had a Fluent API, it doesn't prevent us to read it. Do it early, because James is 20 years old and some parts are clearly not designed to support these changes, and do it fully, because we'll benefit more from it. Thank you.
Thank you. Great introduction to Reactor. There were a couple of questions. I think that, let's start with the first one. What was the biggest downside of moving to Reactor, or the biggest difficulty?
The biggest difficulty, in my opinion, was the feedback hook. In fact, sometimes you just do some code which appears to work, and you say, okay, on the unit test it works very well, because the unit test only have a limited range of testing, and while we happen to run the whole test suite, including the integration test, nothing works anymore, and you basically don't know why. And it was a bit our fault, because Writer has some extension to give you some hints on the performance inside, and we have not used it even for the just for the experiment, even in the unit test.
Okay. Another question was related to the checkpoint method that you showed. Is checkpoint method working well when doing operations in parallel?
Can you repeat?
Checkpoint method. You showed the checkpoint method. You had a failure in one of the pieces of code, and you had the checkpoint method, which showed you in the logs the precise place where the thing happened.
Okay.
The question was, does this checkpoint method work in parallel?
In parallel, yes. In fact, from time to time, you just don't catch an exception, and it happens in your logs, and you are lost because you have a huge stack trace of reactor internal elements, and you don't know precisely what triggered it, or something very obscure, and adding checkpoints. So okay, in fact, I was trying to run this procedure and this business case, and doing that, it will print that label in your stack trace, helping you to have a better way to locate the issue.
I think that there's one more question, but you already answered it. The question was about the performance. You showed the statistics with performance, so I guess that was answered. So, if there are no more questions, and we are sort of out of time, then, well, I guess that would be it. Thank you.
Thank you.